Five Podcast. Your hosts today are, for episode 1,
Nate Bryce.
And for episode 2,
Evan Kennedy.
Episode 3,
Caleb Brooks.
And episode 4 is me, Isaiah Wimmer. And last but not least, episode 5,
Chris Curran.
Alright, let's get to it.
Episode 1, A New Day. We start here with Lee, the main character in the back of a police car, being taken to prison. As the officer driving is telling him stories, not really paying attention to the road, they hit a walker and wind up rolling the car off a ledge. Lee crawls his way out of the car, kills a few zombies, and eventually leads his way to Clementine, who will be one of the main characters as well. So Lee and Clementine end up moving to a farm with some people, and they eventually have to move from the farm because of a death to Lee's family drugstore, and then they eventually also make their way to a motel where they then set up camp for about 3 months. One thing that I noticed in episode 1 is that the music is everything. It gives the player a better understanding of the theme throughout the game and allows them to prepare for events that are about to occur. One significant moment is when Lee and Clementine are, I don't think it's when they're locked in a room, but they're in a room at the drugstore, and they're having a conversation, and the music playing is kind of soft and sensitive. And this kind of alludes to the connection that I made between Lee and Clementine about how they have nothing, either of them. No family, no loved ones, and all they have is each other. And for me, that was a foreshadow to the rest of the game, that they were going to be each other's family.
And then going into episode 2, it fast forwards to Lee and Mark finding a man in the middle of the woods who's got his leg set in a bear trap. He's also with a kid named Ben, and both of them come back to the motel and try to save Ben's band teacher's leg. And the motel is where Lee and company are staying. After the death of the band teacher, two brothers, Dan and Andrew, find the motel and offer to trade their gas for food with Lee and his group. Once Lee and others accept the offer, they are led to their farm, Andrew and Dan's farm, where they are taken in for a meal and possibly a place to stay in the future. As time goes along, Lee and others become more skeptical of this family, who they eventually find out are cannibals. When Lee finds Mark's leg chopped off in the top of the in the upper part of the house, this forces a brawl between Lee and company and the family of the farm, and this would eventually force Kenny, Lee and company to leave the farm. So speaking on this episode really quick, we notice that two big things are weather patterns and the conflict and tension within the episode. First of all, the conflict and tension is high at the motel. It's also high at the barn, I should say the farm. Lee will experience racism from Larry, who's a member of his group, and that's something that causes tension between the two. And also, I think everyone's they're trying to be all for themselves rather than for the group, trying to find who's really in power here, who has the leadership, and I think that leads to a lot of conflict and tension, especially in a time like this, and I think that brings out kind of the worst in people, especially when you're in the middle of the zombie apocalypse like that. As far as the weather patterns go, when they first get to the farm, we notice birds are chirping. It's nice and sunny and bright outside. There's a swing set that's to be fixed, that Lee's going to fix for Clementine and Duck. And just because we see them and the family have a good relationship at the beginning. But as time goes along and as they find out the true colors of the family, it gets night. It becomes nighttime. It becomes darker outside. And then all of a sudden, it starts to rain and thunderstorm. And when Lee and Kenny are approaching Andrew from behind, when he's outside of the barn, it's downpouring rain. It's absolutely a huge change in the weather, and we notice that the weather patterns are kind of reflecting on the mood of the overall episode, and yeah, we just kind of noticed that.
Mm-hmm. Then going from there into episode 3, which is the long road ahead, it starts off immediately with Lee and Kenny going into the town to get the last of the supplies, and they're immediately posed with a choice. As a woman runs out from one of the buildings and she is surrounded by zombies, they can either kill her to put her out of her misery, try to save her or leave her to die to be a distraction for them. So they chose to leave her to die so they could get into the drugstore, get the last of the supplies. Lee is then attacked by zombies as the door falls on him, and Kenny lifts the door off and pulls Lee out, and they leave. They get back to the motel, and Lily immediately gets Lee to investigate some missing drugs, so he does, and he finds them outside of the wall in a little vent. And when he takes them, he brings them back to Lily, and at this moment, the bandits attack and talk about a deal that the bandits had with somebody on the inside of the motel. Then a big gunfight ensues, walkers come, and the group gets inside the RV and escapes. Now this leads them down the road. Lily is trying to blame Ben. She's saying that they should pull over to take care of it, and then they hit a walker, so they do pull over. Lily goes berserk, tries to shoot Ben, but then Doug saves Ben's life and actually takes the bullet for him. And keep in mind, Doug could be interchangeable with Carly, depending on who you saved in the drugstore in episode 1. Then the group decides to leave Lily on the side of the road, and they drive away. They get to a train. They get the train working. And now this is where they have to put Duck down. So Duck is originally going to be killed by Katja, but then Katja kills herself, and then they find Katja dead, and then Lee kills Duck for Kenny. And then they get back on the train. That's when they meet Krista and Omid. And then that's when thousands of zombies start chasing them as they get into the city. Now, the biggest things about this episode were the sound. When they're in the motel, they talk about how quiet it is, how quiet it has been for a few days, and there's absolutely no music going on at this point. This is just to show a lull in action. When the motel is being overrun, the sound is very energetic and it's very fast-moving. When they find out Duck got bit, the sound is very sad. When they get the train working, the music is very hopeful. And then when they actually kill Duck, the sound stops immediately, which then comes into Kenny and how his world stops when Duck and Katja die. So that kind of shows how then Kenny is struggling to be himself and be strong after his son and wife die, and struggling to be strong for the rest of the group so everybody else can survive. But obviously he's having a very hard time with this. So that leads us into episode 4.
Yeah, episode 4 is around every corner. And it leads right in from the train, and the group gets into Savannah, where Clementine's parents are supposed to be. They find this mansion, so right now they have some sort of sanctuary. But then Omid his leg got injured and are on the way there, and he needs meds like really quick. And so Kenny and Lee go down, try to find a boat. They can't find anything. All the boats have been taken. I mean, it's been a while now since the apocalypse broke out, and they eventually meet a character named Molly, and she at first like almost kills Lee and Kenny, but then Clementine actually appears, and Clementine convinces her not to. So this is just like the first part of Clementine's really usefulness is coming to be brought up, and I think we'll talk about that more in episode 5. But so then the group gets separated, and then one of the themes of the 4th episode comes up, where you have to make really intense decisions that will change the gameplay. So like one of them was Lee, Kenny, Molly, and Clementine are trying to escape because a bunch of walkers show up, and they go down an alley, and everybody but Lee gets up this fire escape, and then it breaks, or there's like a bunch of walkers that Lee gets trapped in. It's so intense, and you're mashing the buttons on the keyboard. You don't want to die, and there starts to be like a pulse and like a heartbeat in there, and the music starts to get so intense, and you almost get an adrenaline rush into the game, and you finally back up, and then you take a sewer grate off, and you go down into the sewers, and you're safe for now from the zombies. And eventually you do get back, and there's no boats, but Clementine, again, proves her usefulness, because she finds a boat in the shed behind the house, and nobody thought to check there for anything. So she's really starting to pull through.
And we could refer back to episode 2, when Clementine and Lee and Kenny and Carly are all in the trailer, and they're trying to find a way out, and there's a little air vent that only Clementine can fit through. And Clementine ultimately goes through that air vent, gets out of the trailer, opens it up from the outside, and allows them to escape, which allows them to get out of the farm and find their way back to the motel, which is a second reason, or a second way we could show Clementine's usefulness.
Right.
I don't know if you guys remember this part, but without her, there wouldn't be a game, because at the start, when Lee just meets her, Lee is getting attacked by a zombie in her house, and this thing is crawling up his legs, like he's on the ground, and Clementine's behind him with a hammer. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
He grabs the hammer.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, that was...
And that could be the start of their relationship. Lee said, "Look, you saved my life. Let me put my energy into saving your life throughout the rest of this season as well."
Yeah.
And that could be the beginning of how close they are.
And even at the beginning of episode 4, when she crawls through the doggy door to open up the mansion doors for the group to get to safety, is another reason why Clementine is very, very useful.
Yeah.
So episode 5 is called No Time Left, and it's pretty appropriately named. Lee is obviously bitten and dying at this point, and the whole episode is pretty much living his final hours and his journey to find and save Clementine. So eventually he finds her in the hotel that her parents used to go to, and Clementine, at least in my story, she shot the creepy guy. I'm not really sure if he has a name, but she shot the creepy guy and saved Lee, which again shows that connection between them. And actually, even before that, Lee goes by himself through the streets to go find her because he gets separated from Krista and Omid, and sort of just has this venting process where he's just killing zombies and just pretty much going ham. Like, there's pretty gruesome images of him just hacking away with like a butcher knife, and I think it was sort of like an outlet of him saying like, okay, I'm gonna die and I can't protect Clementine, and it was just his way of releasing it, I guess. But the big things that I noticed was the color scheme of episode 5 compared to the other ones. It progressively seemed to get darker as the season went on, but episode 5 was really the climax. Like, it was pretty much black and white, and everything was gray and dark, and like I think Kevin said before, like it was stormy in Savannah too, I'm pretty sure, or overcast at least. So that it just showed, like, gave the mood of the whole episode. And then the other thing was this connection that you make with Clementine as the person playing Lee, and doing everything you can to save her. So yeah, that's all I have.
Just looking back on the overall themes and the main points of season 1, what would you guys say really stuck out in your mind?
In the earlier episodes, we were talking about sound and weather patterns that were like the main, not necessarily determinants, but symbols that really foreshadowed what was going to happen next. So to me, that's what stuck out the most, at least in the earlier episodes.
And the sound helps bring you, like, emotionally bring you into the situation. As I was kind of talking about before, when Lee's like getting trapped and you start to like feel a heartbeat, and that kind of just gets you going, and it really puts you in those kinds of situations, especially like near the end. Like, there's super sad music going on. Clementine's crying. You can see her, and her voice is really what got me. So the voice acting in this game really is pretty good, and it makes you feel like it's there. I mean, she starts to choke up, and that makes me, a grown 18-year-old man, start to choke up too.
Tear up
yeah, like,
and
it's hard to admit, but I mean, it really does get you. It puts you right into the game.
Yeah, the emotional attachment that you develop is just second to none. It's like, it's weird.
Yeah.
I feel like I was in the game a lot of times where, like, you're not focused on anything. I'd be sitting there playing, and my roommate would be yelling my name, and I'd be like sweating just playing the game.
Or like, you start to shake.
Yeah, you're just like
my
shaking.
phone would start to tap, and I'm like, Okay, stop.
Yeah,
Like
like
when-
it's a game.
When you're on the farm and Dan is like trying to push you up against the electric fence, you have to keep pressing A. I'm just like,
Yeah,
just like keep pressing it.
Yeah.
I love that. But overall, I thought the biggest thing that I saw was the relationship between Lee and Clementine.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing quite like their bond, and I think they understand each other, coming from no family at all. Clementine saves Lee. Lee saves Clementine later on in the episodes, and I just think it's a special bond, and that makes me wonder, without Lee now, how is Clementine going to do in season 2?
Mhm.
So, who do you think really is the main character of this story? Is it Lee or is it Clementine? And just because you're playing Lee doesn't necessarily mean he's the main character, right?
I'd definitely say Clementine because all of the main action typically revolves around her and doing what's best for her in the long run. Like, although you may be playing as Lee, you're constantly thinking of how you can keep Clementine safe and constantly thinking of what you can do next to make sure that she's okay. And that's another big symbol that I saw throughout the game was, like we talked about in episode 1, how she gave the hammer to Lee to kill that zombie that was in her house. And episode 2, how she crawled through the air duct to get him out of that box they were in. But really the progression was people taking care of Clementine earlier on, and then Clementine really progressed and started taking care of everybody else, which in and of itself is kind of foreshadowing about how Lee's going to die and how Clementine's going to be by herself and how she is ready to take care of herself. Like whether it's her getting Lee off the streets in episode 5 when he passes out, or Clementine shooting the stranger and saving Lee's life, or just all the other times that Clementine have done things that have really saved Lee or saved the entire group.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I think that's about it. I think that's all we got.
What do we rate?
You rate the game?
Yeah.
Let's go 1 to 10.
Yeah.
I'd say 9.5.
Say about a 9.
Yeah, I'd say 9 too.
I'd say
I
9.
would play again.
I would.
I'd go into season 2.
But
Professional review.
to make our
9 out of 10.
podcast more unique, we need to have some sort of weird grading scale, like.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, to make you want to listen to the next installment that's not coming. So I would say, how hard did it tug on your heartstrings? 1 out of 9. I would say a 9.
Say like a 7.47.
7.47.
Heartless.
Yeah, I'm
8.
heartless.
Yo.
I'm heartless.
I'm at a 9 for that. And then, like, the amount of Lees at the end, 0 out of 1. Yeah, just 9 out of 10. All right.
Thanks for listening.
Yep.